Hey, thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about the foundation for the band, which is drums and bass. It's the key to making everything happen. These guys hold it all together. I'm here with Tim Newton and Jason Foster today to talk about the importance of the rhythm section. We'll be dealing with drums and bass separately as well, but these guys are the heartbeat of the band, of any band, and it's important that they play together because they're going to set the tone for the whole rhythm section. So I thought we'd start today with just one of my favorite grooves. These guys lock into a song we do, He Never Sleeps, He Never Slumbers. And when I'm singing it, I always just get a smile on my face because the groove feels so good. So let's just start with that, and then we'll break it down a little bit. So count it off, Tim. Of hearing our prayer, when we are weak, He becomes stronger. So rest in His love, cast all of your care on Him. Verse 2, try it. Do you feel that the Lord has forgotten your need? Just remember that God is always working in ways you cannot see. That's right. Our God is able. He is mighty. He is faithful. He never sleeps. He never slumbers. He never tires of hearing our prayer. When we are weak, He becomes strong. So rest in His love. Cast all of your cares on Him. Yeah, so that's just a little bit of a groove that always makes me smile, and it's because these guys lock in to such just a solid beat. Just play a little bit of that. What are you playing, Tim, on that? Just. Yeah, so it's pretty basic, pretty simple, but that is kind of what makes the rhythm section work. It's just, I call it meat and potatoes, just kind of boom, 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 boom. And they could be playing a lot more, but that's just a groove. And if they're locked into that, the whole band locks into that, and the vocals lock into that. So, I mean, this is the basis for everything. So, Tim, just tell us a little bit about your approach to playing. How are you thinking about the beat, particularly on that song? I know there's a lot that goes into it, tuning the drums, getting everything ready. I want to talk about the groove a little bit first before you get into all that. Some drummers play right on the front of the beat. You know, if a beat is about this long, some drummers play way up here. For instance, Chester Thompson, who was with Genesis and Frank Zappa. He's played with me before. His beat is way up here. He's always pushing. He's playing in time, but it's always right on the front end. And then Carl Albrecht, who's played with me a lot too, his beat is always right on the very back of the beat. So I always feel like I'm rushing when I usually do a little bit. But it's I think when a beat is back here, it just seems to lock in a little bit better to me. But just talk about your concept on that. Am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy. That's true. There is kind of on top of the beat, in the middle of the beat, and behind the beat, you have different players who you can kind of categorize in those three areas. But I think we all kind of have like a natural placement in that. I tend to be more behind the beat, but it's something you need to be aware of because there's different kinds of music for Don's stuff, especially on some of the ballads. you're gonna want to stay behind the beat, especially on a ballad.
It seems like that's all I play is ballads.
Yeah.
But it's always that kind of boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
I'm just a sucker for that kind of groove.
Yeah, me
I mean, you
too.
can take that beat and play about 10 of my songs. Your steadfast love to the head. There we go again. And how about this one? And you make me lie down. I'm a sucker for that groove. I love it. So I guess playing on the back of the beat fits perfectly for
Feels
yeah,
good,
it is a desirable thing, and it's good to work on. It's honestly good to work on all three to be able to, if it's more aggressive music, be able to play a little bit more on top of the beat. And working with metronomes can really help you work on all three of those time feels. But I think the key is intentionality. When you know the difference between, when to use those approaches that's
Talk
the key.
about the importance of playing with a metronome, because that really is the key to a groove. It's got to be locked in. And Tim, you play with a metronome.
Yeah.
Almost all the time, right? You certainly practice.
Yeah,
with it,
it's you really in this day and age when a lot of live touring acts and churches and everyone's using click tracks or metronomes in their live performances. It's crucial to be able to play with a click, and working with a metronome at all different tempos, slow, medium, fast. It's just a great tool. Or if it's a medium up-tempo beat you're struggling with, slowing it way down to slow motion and working at that groove kind of in slow motion with the click is really helps you iron out some things.
A lot of times when a drummer loses the groove, it's filling into a chorus or something like that. The fill into a chorus, it's always wants to push ahead of the beat.
That's right.
How do you practice holding back on that?
Yeah, I mean that's just time spent with a metronome. There's no substitute. So working on grooves with your metronome, but like you said, working on your fills and your transitions, verses to chorus. These are really practical things. I mean, there's a lot of information out there for drummers on technical stuff, but this is super everyday, practical, meat and potatoes kind of stuff. Just grooves and fills, playing appropriately for a song, and all of that ties in with working with a metronome.
Give us an example of the fills.
So let's see. Let's take that song for instance, and I think we have a click feed going, so the listener can hear the click as well. Okay. So I'll come out of the verse of that song. Okay. He Never Sleeps. So I'll just do the last couple bars alone. So, I was pretty tight with the click there, hopefully, and that's what you're aiming for. You're aiming for keeping a locked groove. It's okay if it breathes a little bit. It can ebb and flow, but a metronome will definitely help you get that under control so it's not all over the place, and then the groove kind of disappears when you start rushing too much or pulling back too much. Yeah. That's your goal.
In the excitement of a performance, or you get excited in a worship song in your church, the tendency is going to be to rush into the chorus, and things just, when you got 1,000 or 2,000 people out there, the energy level is up, everybody's adrenaline is running a little bit higher, and the tendency is to rush. But a good drummer is going to lock you into that groove with a metronome, and it takes some discipline, but
that's right. Yeah, and practice. A great thing about practicing is that in the midst of those circumstances where you're nervous and you're playing in front of a big group or whatever the scenario is, if you've practiced, you've developed some muscle memory, and it's amazing how many times I'll maybe be nervous in the middle of a concert or something, and I'll see my muscle memory from having practice kind of kick in, and it's like, oh wow, I'm glad I worked on that.
Yeah, real good.
Yeah, talk about your practice discipline a bit.
Okay, yeah.
Do you just practice on the stage, or do you?
Whenever you tell me what song.
I see you practicing all the time. These guys, we throw them I don't want to give the band too much notice. They're always asking me for song lists, and I love to throw in a new song without them having to think about it too much.
Yeah.
And
Keeping us on our
I guess
toes.
it's just my mischievous nature. I love to see Tim back there scrambling for his
Totally
metronome, for his
scrambling.
marking to see what's the tempo of this song. So
That's
right.
just talk about your practice discipline a bit.
Yeah, I mean, even when we're on the road, a lot of times on tour, I'm sure there's many an annoyed hotel visitor who's rooming right next to me, and I'm in my hotel room practicing on a pad or a pillow with a metronome. I'll work on just basic stuff, whether it's quarter notes, playing along with a click, a metronome, just evening out strokes and stuff, because all that stuff adds up to a good groove. I'll work on grooves, breaking stuff down, as I said, breaking it into slow motion. Years of studying with drum teachers and learning rudiments and all that stuff. So again, you can find a lot of great info on that on the internet or wherever, but a lot of what you need to be practicing is just practical stuff. So, if you're in a church group or in a band, work on those songs. That's a great starter. A lot of people will start on some crazy new technique that a lot of drummers are doing. But if you start with the songs you're actually playing at church or in your band, that's a great way, because you're also preparing for your gigs. You're preparing for just practical stuff.
Do you have a rule of thumb for how many fills you use in a song? I mean, I'm sure, like any player, you can think of a fill every 2 bars or every 4 bars.
That's right.
There's
Yeah.
something you could do,
That's
but is there like you divide by half and use half the ideas
That's
that
right.
come to you? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, the less fills you use, the more impact they have when you do them. So, and obviously there's different styles of music, different genres call for different amounts of playing or kind of overplaying. But you want to kind of lean towards the underplaying. That, I mean, worship leaders, band leaders, songwriters tend to favor drummers who kind of maybe underplay a little bit. Your Jeff Porcaro type of guys who are just great. They just lay down the pocket and they only fill when it's necessary. But a great exercise to try would be sit at your drums, play for 5 minutes, play for 10 minutes with no fills, just a groove over and over. And it might drive you crazy the first time you try it, but it's a great exercise, and it develops that sense of, okay, this is my job as a drummer, is to play grooves and play appropriately for a song. So that's a great exercise to do.
I like what he said there. He talked about if you only use a fill every once in a while, then it's going to stand out. It's going to become a significant moment. But if you're filling every 2 bars, it's like people say, all right, the guy's just a busy player.
Yeah.
Tim is not, I've played with a lot of drummers. Tim is not a flashy drummer, but in terms of his groove, it's just always right there. And I think my preference would be just give me a drummer with a great groove. What about we talked about fills earlier, we were talking about the song, You Will Be My Song.
That's right.
Talk about that fill. Let's just roll through that once, because that's just real disciplined in time.
Do you want to play it first?
Okay, we can try
Okay.
it. Where do we pick up?
Maybe halfway through a verse or something.
Okay, like even when a melody won't come, even when my words are not enough, you will be my song. You will be when I'm lost for words to say. Yeah,
the fill that I did going into the chorus, I was listening to your vocal on your "You Will Be," so I listened to the rhythm of what you were singing, and just being aware that, a lot of drummers think, okay, it's going into the chorus, here's a chance to just throw this fill I learned in, as opposed to, well, what works for the song? Does it go with what the vocals are doing? Does it kind of fight the vocal?
That's good.
So these are questions you might want to ask yourself.
So even when a melody won't come, even when my words are not enough, you will be my song. Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't have to match the rhythm exactly every time. It depends on the song and the situation, but it should complement it. It should complement the song, the vocals, all that stuff. And
that's a pretty hard fill to play right in the pocket. I mean, because there's a lot of space there between those notes. And if Tim was rushing that fill, it would totally mess me up because I'm singing, "You will be my song."
Yeah.
And if the beat is ahead of me, wow, it'll really throw me. But that fill particularly, you know, just imagine, look at all the space between every hit.
Yeah.
That's like a long way. So it's important that...
Right, yeah, accuracy is key to a great groove. So again, the metronome. And again, with the metronome, slow practice. I really emphasize working on stuff slowly because, you know, all the up-tempo stuff with tons of technical fills, it's impressive, but it's, you know, there's not as much room for error. You know, the slow songs, man, that's the stuff that takes...
Try that. Just do that fill a couple times with the metronomes for the
Oh, sure,
so they can hear it.
Okay, so I'll do a couple bars of verse and then
I'm not
going into
play.
the chorus.
Melody won't come, even when my words are not enough. Yeah. There's a lot of space between those hits.
Yeah. The more space, the more room for error.
Yeah.
So it pays to work with the metronome and to work on accuracy and precision.
Yeah.
Obviously, playing with feeling and energy, all that stuff adds up too. You can't just be precision without the right energy. But
do you travel with the same kit on the road all the time?
No. When we're on tour with Don, we're going to all different countries and venues, and we're renting a lot of equipment. I bring a few, you know, staple pieces, my snare drum, my cymbals, but we're always renting drum sets. And
okay, so talk about the importance of good gear, and talk about the importance. I always see you tuning your drums, and just talk about the importance of that.
There's a lot of great info on specifics of tuning drums, but it's just be intentional. I think that's kind of the key to all of this stuff, is being intentional. So really research your tuning on how to do it. There's all kinds of great methods you can research, but you know, be aware of where the drum naturally wants to sit as far as tuning. Be aware of pitches. I like to do like a fifth. You can do a fourth or a fifth or whatever you've kind of worked out.
That was kind of like a...
Yeah. And
why are you tuning to like a C, for instance? I mean, that's
you know, you kind of know your drums, and you know the range that, like, this drum is going to be great at a C, maybe a little lower, maybe a little higher, depending on
and the way you tune, it's all, you got to tune all the keys around the rim, right?
Yeah, you're tuning all the lugs, and you're kind of going in a cross, you're doing a crossover method. You go back and forth, and you know, we could get really specific with how to do that, but you know, learn the right ways to tune the drum, and you know, learn the placement where each drum likes to sit in the scale.
I remember, I don't know where we were, somewhere on tour, and I was waiting for Tim to play the groove, and I thought, because I couldn't see him because I was facing the audience, and I looked over, I see him kind of crawling under his drums, because didn't the snare fall over or something? What was?
Yes, that's right. Yes, the equipment can fall apart on you, and especially when you're on tour and you don't know, you're not as familiar with whoever's drum set it is, and stuff can fall apart. But it's all about being flexible and working with the gear that is in front of you. And if you have the right attitude, you can make almost anything work.
Yeah.
So even in trying situations.
We talked about grooves yesterday a bit. We talked about volume. Many of you watching this video are probably not playing in front of 5,000 and 10,000 seater auditoriums. You're in a church where the acoustics are not very dead. So you're faced with a difficult situation. Everything's probably pretty tight on stage, and you maybe have a mixed audience of grandmothers and grandfathers and young people. So who are you going to play to? A lot of drummers just have a problem backing off on volume because they think they're going to lose the groove. But we talked about this a little bit in the general session, but just what is your, we're in different venues all the time.
That's right.
Yeah, we play in large venues, but there's a lot of times we find ourselves in a little church. So we gotta readjust the way we think about a song, but it doesn't, because you play softer does not mean that you're going to lose the feel or the groove of a song. So talk about that a little bit. What are your options?
I think just like a piano has knobs that you can tune, or a guitar player has different settings that they like. As a drummer, you kind of have to have different settings. Like when we're in a outdoor venue and it's, we can all play full volume, and that's great. I kind of have that setting, and I know that's going to mean I can hit each drum. I can do rim shots on the snare. I can get the full sound out of the kit that I would normally like to get. But if we're in an echoey church or some kind of gymnasium or something, I'm going to have to adjust. I know what kind of setting to notch myself at, and that might mean sticks, but maybe not rim shots and full hits, or maybe it's not hitting the edge of the cymbal, maybe it's crashing with just the tip of the stick. But it's like you kind of have these notches in your mind of how to adjust your approach. And then if it's, if it keeps, you need to keep scaling back because of volume issues, you're going to maybe want to switch to brushes or something. Whatever it takes to accommodate the situation.
So, for instance, we were messing around with "He Never Sleeps, He Never Slumbers," which is, I love that groove when it pops. When you're playing full stick. Just try that once.
Okay.
Just count it off. Let's play a little bit of that, and then we'll, back it down to. This is the way we play if there are 10,000 people out there. Okay. When we are weak, he becomes strong. Cast all of your care on him. All right, now the crowd just went down to 200 people.
All right. Okay.
What are you going to do?
Let's try that. So I would back it down to sticks a little lighter.
Count it. He never tires of hearing a prayer. When we are weak, he becomes strong. Cast all of your cares on him. All right, now the crowd is down to 100, and it's a senior citizens Christmas banquet. What are you going to do?
Okay, I would. There's a lot of different ways you could mix this up, but they have rods and brushes and all kinds of stuff. So maybe it means throwing a towel on the snare drum. But
Kick it off for the senior citizens.
Okay. All right. 1, 2, 3.
He never sleeps, never tires of hearing a prayer. When we are weak, he becomes strong. So rest in peace, cast all of your care on him. Okay, and the senior citizens love that. And now we're in a home group, in your cell group meeting.
That's right.
With 10 people.
Okay.
In the living room.
Okay.
Now what are you going to do?
You can really start to get creative now. Maybe play the couch or something. But
But see, the groove is still there. We didn't lose a groove, did we? I don't think we did. I mean,
No.
the groove still felt good.
Yeah.
It was still inspiring me. But there's a way to do this. So now we're at your home group meeting. In your living room.
Right. So you kind of get creative and maybe think a little bit more percussive, think a little bit more like a percussion
You probably wouldn't have
player.
the whole drum set set up, would you?
Yeah. There's, sometimes it's just time to scale back and get
snare?
a cajon or a conga or something.
Snare,
but
bass, and a hi-hat, that's it, maybe? Something
Sure.
like
I've done all those in live clubs or venues, churches, and just having to be creative and flexible.
that? Okay, kick it off for your home group.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Never tires of hearing a prayer. When we are weak, oh, he becomes strong. So rest, cast all of your care on him. Do verse 2. Verse 2. That feels really good. You cannot see. Our God is able. He is mighty. He is faithful. Never sleeps. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it still has a great groove to it. I don't think we lost anything in the intensity, but it's a lot of fun.
Right.
And really,
And-
if we were in that small of a setting, you wouldn't have your toms. You'd probably have snare, bass, and a hi-hat, probably.
That's right.
And one cymbal, maybe.
Yep. And the groove is always essential. So whether you're playing full volume or having to tone it down like that, if you've worked on your kind of precision and accuracy in your groove, your timing, metronome work, all that stuff can help you whatever setting you're in.
Yeah, because it can. If you just jump to that, I imagine it can be a little bit disconcerting to you. Like, wait a minute, they're asking me to play with brushes, and if you haven't practiced that way, it'll make you feel like I'm not laying down a good enough groove.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
you
actually
do have to
practice,
be prepared and
so you actually
practice.
practice that way.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that practice has just come from having just been thrown into that situation. But it definitely helps to go over all scenarios if you can.
And you've played professionally. You played pop. You've been on tour with pop bands and as well. And just because you're with a pop band doesn't mean that you're going to be in huge venues playing loud all the time.
Right. No, even on big tours, sometimes you'll get thrown into a smaller venue where you have to get creative. I remember one time I had to play a floor tom case as my bass drum instead of a bass drum. So you just have to be flexible and go with the flow and realize it's not about you getting the way I mean, my preference would be to be in a studio getting to hit as hard as I want because I love the way the drums sound when they're full volume, but you have to serve the singer and the band that you're playing with and the situation, the audience or congregation.
Yeah. And just quickly, just talk about the attitude of a drummer in the band. I think we hit on this a little bit yesterday, but just your attitude as a drummer. The drummer really is the leader of the band. I mean, when I'm on stage, I'm always looking to Tim or whoever's playing drums as kind of they're the key to the band, and essentially you're driving the band.
That's right.
So we're all looking to you, and how do you look to that as your attitude? What is the attitude of your leader? You're having to drive it, but really you're a servant of everybody's too. So to be a leader, you've got to be a little more aggressive about it. But yet you're serving. Talk about that.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I think you have to you have to be aggressive in the sense that if you're too laid back, the music can lose a little bit of energy or conviction. So I think playing with conviction is a huge part of it and a huge part of guiding a band. When there's conviction, that just really translates to the situation, to the music. But in that conviction, you're also a servant. You're serving the music, whether that's picking fills that go with the vocals, or tuning your drums to fit the band that you're playing with. I think that being aware of all that really helps.
Yeah. You know, when Tim first started playing with me, I could tell from as I was playing that I was waiting for Tim to be a little more aggressive and to kind of set the beat, and yet Tim, because he is such a servant, was waiting for me. He didn't want to offend me, and and feel like he's taking control of everything. And I think we discussed this a little bit. I said, I just need you to drive it.
Yeah.
And he was trying to listen to me like, oh my gosh, Don wants to go slower, he wants to go faster, and really what I wanted was for Tim to put it down. But it just takes a little bit of discussion and talking about that. But as far as my concept of a drummer is the driver of the band. When you know, I can rehearse, we can rehearse new songs, I can talk about concepts, but when we hit the stage, Tim is really driving. And I think we all acknowledge that.
Yeah.
So that part of being a drummer is to assume that leadership role as well. And you don't, just because you're the driver doesn't mean you got to be popping the snare all the time so loud. You can,
Right.
I mean, that groove, that little soft groove we played, you were still driving it.
That's right. So creating a pulse that
Yeah.
helps it. And,
Yeah.
and as
You
far
said
as-
something earlier about a pulse
Yeah.
that helps with the groove. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean,
thought that was good.
if you're, I think a consistent pulse just creates a groove. It creates like this kind of hypnotic thing where you just lock into a song, and when it's, you know, on He Never Sleeps, it's kind of an 8th note pulse. On another song, it might be like a 16th note pulse, but it's creating that pulse that's consistent, that really engages the listener. It just feels great with the whole band.
Another, let's just hit a little bit of Be Praised. That's a little more aggressive, but that's kind of I also like that groove. I'm not going to sing all of it, but you know, let's just go to a verse and a chorus of that song,
Okay.
and that's that pulse. You just kind of
it's
drive
that-
that thing.
This is like more of a driving 8th note pulse, but keeping it strong and consistent is what makes it work.
All right, kick it off.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
All praise to the one from whom it all began, the one who formed the stars, who gave life to man. You set the world in motion, created sky and ocean. Be praised. Oh, listen to your people, lifting up your name. Be praised. Be praised. Be praised. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. That's kind of a fun groove. Just driving. You're not doing a lot of fancy fills.
No.
Yeah,
Just what the song requires. And a lot of that is, you know, a lot of that ties back into who you listen to as a player. You know, you are inspired by certain drummers or whatever instrument you play, and so much of that is the whole you are what you eat kind of thing. You know, if you are always looking at technical drummers, always looking at technical musicians, chances are you're going to try to be doing that in whatever situation you're involved in. So if all I listen to is technical players who are doing crazy, flashy stuff, you know, when I'm playing with you,
Yeah.
that's probably what I'm going to want to do, you know?
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm
I
a
think
crazy,
it's-
flashy guy.
so chances are, you know, so find some players that are less is more kind of players who just have a great feel. You know, we talked about the behind the
Yeah.
beat feel. Just find players who just have, who serve the music, who do it well, and just
Great.
be inspired by those guys, because it really helps whatever band you're playing
Yeah.
with. People they're gonna love you for
Yeah.
playing more simple and
Yeah, I think you said it. Less is more.
That's right.
And that's a good rule of thumb. Whether you're a drummer, a bass player, a keyboard player, a guitar player, less is more. I mean, it's just, hey, every fill you think about, use about half of them.
That's right.
Probably better. All right. So the other 50% of the basic rhythm section, drums and bass, is Jason Foster.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Jason is a keyboard player and a singer and a drummer, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of, but he just kind of picked up bass as well. You've got 3 basses over there. Just talk about your concept as a bass player. I know a lot of it is what Tim talked about as well, playing to the song, playing to the artist and stuff like that. But just talk about what you think about as a bass player and what your role is in the band.
Well, yeah. My role is to play the right bass notes, the bass harmony.
Let's before we do that, talk about the importance of being in tune.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, start right at the beginning. I mean, this is if the bass is out of tune, the whole it's the foundation. The whole band's got to be out of tune. It's like building a building and your foundation is faulty.
Yeah,
it's gonna crash.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's important to be on literally one accord. And this little thing here, I have a tuner called Snark, and it's about it just clip it onto your bass, and I'm always tuning any moment I have. I'll just click it and just start tuning.
Huh.
And it's just so important for us to gel and sound clean, and just not, you'll hear the waves and so on start to sound pretty bad. So yeah, get a tuner. It's simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. So back to my thoughts of what a bass contributes to a song. The first thing I think about is what are the notes? What are the right notes? What are the bass harmonies? So I learned the chords from Don. And then the next thing I think about are what are the rhythms that the drummer is playing, in particular, the kick. So I'm constantly thinking about the kick pattern. And I'll literally, turn to Tim and say, hey, what are you playing? What are you playing for the verse? What are you playing for the chorus? What are you playing for the bridge? And I literally just, choose to lock with it. Maybe you can do a song. Mm-hmm. Let me see.
Let's do a little bit of Uncharted Territory.
Yeah.
Is that good for this?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll do
it's
a
interesting.
Basic approach first.
Jason says he's watching me or is listening to me for the chords, and a lot of times if he's sitting behind me like you are on stage sometime,
I'm watching your left hand.
I'll see him watching my left hand to see what I'm doing, and just to be mischievous, I'll actually try to cover it up sometime. But I see Jason. He's over there looking to see what note I'm playing, and if I know he's doing that, I'll actually try to wait till the very last minute to hit that chord because he's trying to figure out if I'm going to the 1 or the 6 or the 4.
Right.
Oh, by the way, talk about the number charts just for a second.
Yes.
Before we go into the group.
With numbers.
Yeah.
Some of you might have heard of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, the major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. There are 7 notes and 8 is the octave. So I'll literally count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we pretty much, with approaching music, we're pretty much playing the numbers. So we'll go 1, 4, 6, 5, 1.
Yeah. And it's important to, if we're doing a new song that Kiko, our keyboard player, knows.
Oh, yeah.
And Jason, it's a new song that Jason hasn't heard. I'll see Kiko over there going
1, 4.
And he's calling out the numbers of the chords to Jason.
And saving me from embarrassing myself. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go with a little bit of the Uncharted
Yeah,
Territory.
let's do it.
Is that a good groove to talk about?
Yeah. I'll.
Or do you want to?
It gets a little fancy, but there's the thing to focus on is what's the theme rhythmically. So so let's do that. I'm gonna follow the kick pattern on this one.
Okay. Find myself in uncharted territory. Never felt so lost, never felt so lonely. Where are you, Lord? I'm so afraid I can feel the fear. Yeah.
So in this case, I'm pretty much just playing the 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Yeah, so I'm just pretty much playing the 1 there and keeping it simple. And Tim has a bunch of stuff going on. So usually if there's an instrument kind of doing a bunch of rhythms, usually the rest of us will kind of dumb down. So so in this case, my bass is playing a simple pattern and letting it breathe so that the rhythms come through. And then the next section of the verse, I go into a pattern that locks with other rhythms of his drums. So I'm playing the basic root note where the bass lands, and then there are other rhythms. I'll make a bass line off those little rhythms. So yeah, let's do the verse. Just go right into
the verse?
Yeah.
Okay.
The simple, I'll do it simple and then do the extra rhythms.
Find myself in uncharted territory. Never felt so lost, never felt so lonely. Where are you, Lord? Now, here you go. So afraid, can't control the chaos all around. Where are you? Sing the Lord's song in a foreign land. But how can I forget?
Yeah, so I'm locking with his kick and his snare. Can you play that groove for me one more time? So I'm writing rhythms and writing, and a good way to compose bass lines, a good start, a good training wheel is learning other songs, and learning instinct, and learning sometimes getting the help from musicians who are further along. So it kind of helps us instinctually. Some of it is instinctual and hard to teach, or hard to break down. So now
because you were a drummer, as well, a drummer and a keyboard player. So you're thinking like a drummer as well. So I think it helps Jason lock in with a drummer because he was a drummer, so he knows what kind of bass drum pattern you've been playing.
Right.
So I think it helps you overall just locking in.
Right.
With the background of being a drummer and a keyboard player, you're listening to all the harmonics, as well.
So I'm constantly thinking of the kick pattern. That's usually my main focus. If I don't know what to play and Don's bringing in a new song, I'm very submissive to Tim. So what some of the mistakes that happen between drums and bass is if Tim does a solid kick pattern and I accidentally play another rhythm, Tim might be tempted to switch to my rhythm, and then I try to play what he played before, and then it's just a train wreck. So what we do is it's kind of unspoken, but Tim, no matter what, will stick to his kick pattern, and I will follow him. So which you've heard in the song. So I'm focused on rhythm, and then I'm focused on playing the right notes. With kind of breaking it down technically, let's talk about groove. And then just to kind of piggyback off of what Tim said, having a steady pulse can really contribute to a really a nice feeling groove. So one of the things I do, the first thing I think about when I think of pulse is muscle memory. Does my body remember where the metronome hits, where the groove lands? So I'll break down each hand. So I might focus on Tim, do you mind giving me a hi-hat? Just eighth notes maybe. So I'll just sit here with my right hand, and with each finger, I'll alternate between pointer finger and middle finger, and lock with that metronome. It helps with an internal pulse. You get used to this groove. And getting my hands lined up so I'm not dragging or speeding up. The groove feels better. So as a bass player, that's what I'm practicing at home, is the right hand, and then eventually incorporating a left hand movement, even if it's just a simple note. And it really helps internally lock with Tim. Yeah.
Jason,
So, yeah.
you've got you've got three basses over there.
Yeah.
You're playing a 5-string.
Yes.
Okay. Now I was actually a bass player in my early years.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I'm nervous now.
A lot of people don't know a lot about me. No, but I was a bass player. But in those days there were no 5-string basses or 6-string basses.
Yeah.
We just had a Fender Jazz bass with 4 strings. You're playing a Fender Jazz.
Yes.
With 5 strings, and you've got a 4-string there, and you've also got a 6-string.
Yeah.
So with an extra string, I mean, the temptation is to start playing extra notes. I mean, what does that extra string do? Everybody almost is playing a 5-string these days, it seems like. But.
So, here, I have a 4-string. Also want to say a big thank you to Warrior for letting me use this as an example. Warrior basses. This has 4 strings, E, A, D, G. It's just your basic fundamental bass, the original. So there are times with modern music these days, having a lower note, being able to go lower seems to be really important, and adding to dynamics and sounding bigger and deeper. So with a 5-string, this is a 5-string. It's pretty much these 4 strings up top, but they added a low string called the B. So it's B, E, A, D, G. So I usually gravitate to this bass when I'm playing a song that's where the notes go deeper. And then there's the 6-string. This one has a higher note. So I like playing that because of I don't have to jump around. Let's say I'm reading charts and I need to do a high line on one of Don's songs maybe. It's easier to focus on my charts and just simply just play it here instead of all the way up here. I'd have to take my eyes off. So it just really helps me to stay focused there. And obviously there are other things you can be creative with. with having extra strings. So yeah, yeah.
Talk about playing technique. You talked about just playing with the fingers. A lot of guys are wanting to pop and play a rhythm with their bass. For instance, we've done a lot of stuff with Abraham Laboriel.
Yeah.
And the joke with Abraham is you got to hire Abraham and a bass player because he's all over the place. But that's Abe. That's what he does.
Yeah.
And then once Integrity came out with that.
I know.
That little
Changed
solo
my
line.
life. Yes.
And then everybody wanted to do that solo line, and then everybody wanted to pop like Abe was popping.
Yeah.
And we got a whole generation of very, very busy bass players trying to be Abraham Laboriel.
Right.
Talk about that technique and how much you use it.
That technique, it's funny. I rarely use it in worship. Maybe playing gospel or playing fusion is probably the only place I'll use it. And with getting into slapping, the thing that people who are learning make the mistake of doing is forgetting the groove. The pulse when I'm playing with my fingers is still the pulse when I'm slapping. So here's a groove. I'll give you an example. Yeah, so when you're slapping, anytime you're getting technical, they got great guys out there, Victor Wooten, Stanley Clark, and they just always go back to the groove. So technically what's happening, there are some things that I'll go home and practice on. I always like to have it in my back pocket just in case Don waves his violin, his bow, and just says, bass solo. Usually comes out of nowhere. So
Right.
I always have these things in my back pocket. So
Like for instance, what do I do with that on? You make me lie down in green pastures?
yes.
Yeah. You are my shepherd. You are my Jesus. You are my Lord. And about this point, I'll point to Jason. Play it.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah, so I'm always having these things in my back pocket, just in case. But I heard someone say talk about with all these vocabulary, all the slapping, everybody wants to learn the fancy stuff. I've heard someone say when approaching a song, you really only need about 10% of it, and it's about having all these tools in your arsenal to be able to pick one or two and use it for that song, but not to crowd everything. Just kind of leaving space. So yeah. Now with slapping, you asked me about the technique part of it. Something that you can go home and practice. Usually with the first thing you do is I would just start with the thumb. So is lining up with the string and pretty much just hitting off of it. So you hit the E string and land on the A string. So I'll sit there and just practice that for a while with a click. I'll hit it. Muting with my left hand. Yeah, so I'll start off just practicing that. And then you could probably go on YouTube and find out all the details. Look up Victor Wooten and so on. They explain it probably much better than I can. But whatever you do, whatever you're going for, practice and do it to a metronome. And never forget the groove, the foundation. So
You talk in your notes. You have a comment: freedom within boundaries.
yes.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
This is the metronome. This is the groove.
That's
first and foremost. But
overall, really, a kind of a like even with being a bass player, play bass when you're in a band, like opposed to sitting there and playing all the high notes. You're called and asked to play bass, so play bass, and with the groove, with the kick patterns, I know my kick pattern. Asking Tim about it, once we agree on it, and he set the tone for that, I'll create with those rhythms, and maybe pick my bass notes on those rhythms. That's my freedom within my space. And same thing with note selection. That changes per genre. In this style, usually the piano player plays the bass note in their left hand, so you don't have the freedom to kind of maybe change a bass note here. So your goal is to just make that note feel good, and just lock with it. And it's a beautiful thing to submit to one another and to submit to that. There are some bass players who just really want to venture off, but there's a beauty in teamwork and coming together to deliver a song, a message, and never lose sight of that. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. What he said is he's talking about teamwork, playing as a team. If you're hired to be a bass player, be a bass player. If you're a bass player in your church worship team, it's not about you. It is, but it isn't. It's about every member of the team. But your job is to put down the foundation, the meat and potatoes. It's not always your time to be popping and all over the neck of the bass guitar, so everybody goes, "Oh my gosh, look at that bass player!" If that happens, you're probably out of line. You just need to take a 6-week sabbatical and sit on the front row for a while and just think about what you're really called to do. But it's not about you. It's not about Tim playing all his fancy licks. It's about pulling the whole thing together. And if these guys are too busy,
right,
the whole band is going to be busy. So that's what I call meat and potatoes. That's I guess you be the meat and you be the potatoes, or I don't know. But it's just the bottom. It's the bottom which makes every song work. And without it, there's just no center to it. So I can't say enough about that. Play your role in the band. If you're a bass player, be a bass player. If you're a drummer, be a drummer. And everything else will come together. Just before we wrap up, just talk about your gear. What do you prefer amp-wise and stuff? I mean,
amp-wise,
what are a lot of guys playing in churches? They're probably are they doing direct boxes with monitors, or what's the best scenario for a bass player?
The best scenario for a bass player, ideal. If I had it my way, I would love to always play with a rig, with an amp and 410s, and just have stage monitors. That's to be able to feel that. You can really feel it under your feet. So that's ideal for me.
Yeah. Is that what happens in most churches on Sunday morning?
And it causes a problem. Usually
because it's too loud.
It's too loud for the singers. The singers can't hear themselves, and then you got a loud drummer, this loud bass player that wants to match his volume, and then the piano player can't hear himself, so he turns up, and then it just gets loud. So having a rig at church can contribute to a problem, to the problem. So the next thing I think about is in-ears, which Chuck has talked about in the other video.
Yeah.
In-ears really help control. I can put my bass as loud as I need it, and and turn whatever else down, and so that's yeah. So with this rig, I'm currently using the Aguilar. They're my favorite. Sound really rich, really great tone, and great options for EQ. And it's simple and straightforward. It's just simple bass, treble, and mids, really, and just a master and gain. So that's just simple, But there are other amps out there, like there's Eden, there's SWR. So those are pretty solid amps. And also, one thing I want to talk about too is your knobs and what they do, and talk about tone. So so most basses have a volume knob and have a blend. It blends between two pickups. So let me let you hear what that sounds like. So this is if it's perfectly in the middle. Both are on. Kind of get a little deepness and a little brightness at the same time. When you put it on the front pickup, you get more of a very round tone. Then all the way to the back, you get a kind of a very bright and mid-rangey tone. So, and also you have your lows and your mids and highs. Usually you'll find it on a bass. So, know your instrument just as much. Yeah.
Tim, just in terms of your gear, do you love playing behind a plexiglass shield? Be honest.
No, I don't. No,
See,
it's
a lot of
not
churches have this problem. Their drummer is too loud, so they build this big plexiglass shield around him, which I really don't like the look of that at all. That's why I'd rather have Tim play with those brushes and something light and get an acoustic sound than him rocking out behind a drum booth. To me, it looks ugly. I know in some situations we've had to use it.
Sure.
But I don't like it because I look back at Tim and he's in this other world behind a plexiglass shield. Talk about that, and then talk about electronic drums. I know you love those so much.
Between that choice, I think I might go with the plexiglass. But yeah, I mean, it's just common these days. You have to get used to plexiglass shields, or in a couple scenarios, I have to actually play in a separate room. At my church, I do that. We have a separate room for the drums, and it just, you're definitely isolated from everything. The benefit is that it sounds great. It sounds great to the congregation, and if it's too loud, if people are complaining about the drums being too loud, in that case, it's usually the sound guy's fault. But so, you just have to get used to these new scenarios, whether you're in a drum room or playing behind plexiglass or in-ears. That's just, these are the new things that are happening. So,
Okay, what about electronic drums?
Electric drums.
What do you have to say about those, Tim?
I personally, I'm not a huge fan, but
have you had to play on
that? A lot
that?
of time. I have had to play, and you spend a lot of time as a drummer working out all the little nuances of playing a real drum set. Where to hit the drum, how to tune them, and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, you're on an electric drum kit. All that work and effort you put in just disappears because it's just pads, and you turn your drum set on or you turn it off. And but in a lot of churches, a lot of places have to do that. And again, just having the right attitude about it and being flexible, and that takes a little bit more knowledge. That's a new instrument to kind of learn as opposed to an acoustic drum set. So spend the time and learn it well, and you might be able to dial it in to sound pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been great being with you today. I hope you have enjoyed this session. Again, it is the key to any band, drums and bass. We don't want to underestimate the importance of what these guys do. I think you heard it. Less is more. Play your role in the band. Be a bass player. Be a drummer, and have the right attitude. If you got to play soft with the groove. It can happen. So I want to thank Tim Newton, Jason Foster. Jason, why don't you just have a word of prayer for drummers and bass players before we go today?
Sure.
Yeah.
Dear Lord, just thinking about all the musicians, worship teams, and particular bass and drums that you would speak to them and talk to them, just as you spoke to me about growing as a musician. I pray that you would be a voice in their ear, and that they would open their ears to you for guidance. Have your way in them. And in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Yeah. Thanks for being with us today. It's been great. If you got any other questions, you can. There'll be some information on the website on the DVD. Go to our website. I'm sure we could put you in touch with Jason and with Tim. The guys are doing that all over the world today. They're doing online sessions. So if you have any other questions, there'll be an address on the screen where you can send your questions. We'll be happy to address them. God bless. Thanks for being with us today.